Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling the latest UK housing market forecast, and it's, well, a bit of a puzzle. We're seeing mainstream house prices predicted to flatten out, yet rents seem to be pushing higher. Our mission? To understand why. The headline numbers show average mainstream prices forecast to rise just 1% in 2025. That's a big drop from the 3.5% expected earlier. But on the flip side, rental growth forecasts for 2026 are actually edging up slightly to 4%.
Exactly. And what the sources are suggesting is that the split is really down to a combination of factors. You've got nerves ahead of the November budget, for one thing, and then there's this ongoing regulatory uncertainty. It's creating a sort of complex imbalance in supply and demand.
Okay, an imbalance. Let's unpack the sales side first.
Yeah.
The sources mention high supply is putting a lid on those mainstream prices. Where's all this stock coming from?
Well, it seems to be a few things converging. There's what you might call a hangover of stock from the April stamp duty deadline changes, people delaying listings perhaps.
Yeah.
Plus, listings that were maybe held back because of the general election timing, and significantly, we're seeing more landlords deciding to sell up. That's adding to the supply.
The landlord sell-off. We'll come back to why they're selling later, I imagine.
Definitely. But you can see the effect in the numbers. In the year to August, new buyer inquiries were actually down 8%, but new properties coming onto the market for sale, they were up 6%.
So more sellers, fewer buyers. Classic supply and demand pressure.
Precisely. Combine that with everyone sort of holding their breath before the November budget, well, it explains the short-term downgrade in price growth forecasts.
Okay, that covers the mainstream. But the sources highlight even bigger shifts in the prime markets, particularly prime central London. That forecast revision is huge, from zero growth expected for 2025 down to -4%. Why is policy hitting the top end so much harder?
Yeah, that's a stark change, isn't it? It seems to be very specifically about policy anxiety around wealth and property taxes. The sources point to speculation intensifying after the welfare reform bill passed back on July 1st. Even though it was seen as watered down, it perhaps fueled fears about where the government might look next for revenue.
So fears of targeted tax hikes.
That seems to be the driver. Things like scrapping the non-dom rules, which affected wealthy foreign residents, that's had an impact. And then there was the October hike in the additional rate of stamp duty, the tax on second homes or investment properties that went up from 3% to 5%.
Right, hitting investors and second home buyers directly.
Exactly. So those specific measures, aimed more at the higher end, are creating a lot of uncertainty in prime markets. And remember, these markets, like prime central London, have already seen prices fall significantly over the past decade. The sources mention around 18, maybe even 20%.
So existing weakness compounded by very specific policy jitters.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so if nervous sellers are driving down sales price expectations, let's look at that flip side, the rental market. You mentioned landlords selling up. That must be connected to why rental forecasts are edging up for next year.
Absolutely. It's a direct link. What the sources are calling the unintended consequences of regulation. Landlords are reacting to potential changes, like the renters' rights bill.
The one that might make it harder to regain possession of a property.
Yes, potentially removing no-fault evictions. That increases the perceived risk and complexity for landlords.
Yeah, okay.
Then you add in the prospect of stricter green regulations, meaning potentially expensive upgrades needed for properties. And there's even been speculation, about charging national insurance on rental income eventually.
Wow, okay, so it's a cumulative effect.
It is. These things chip away at profitability and increase hassle, prompting some landlords to exit the market.
Which shrinks the pool of available rental homes.
And pushes up rents, hence that revised forecast of 4% growth for 2026.
So wrapping this up, what's the key takeaway for you, our listener, trying to navigate this? There's a lot of short-term noise here.
There really is. And the sources emphasize looking beyond the immediate volatility. The long view is crucial. Savvy investors are apparently taking note. When you see prime central London prices down maybe 20% over 10 years.
That looks like a potential entry point to some.
It could be. Reports suggest some are making offers now, factoring in the current dip, perhaps betting on longer-term growth, and maybe, just maybe, anticipating a different political or regulatory landscape after the next general election, say post-2029.
It's a fascinating picture regulation, trying to achieve certain aims, but seemingly squeezing both sellers and renters in the process. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If these short-term policy uncertainties are driving landlords out and pushing rents higher, creating this rental shortage, will that pressure eventually force the government to maybe rethink or stabilize its approach? Or are we just seeing a permanent split where the sales and rental markets increasingly operate under totally different pressures? Something to consider. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.